And hello, I am Officer Saunders. I am the school resource officer here at school. And I'm going to start with chapter 14 called Hide and Go Squeak. You guys ready? Okay. Apparently the day after Thanksgiving, humans do two things: eat leftovers from the day before and go shopping. Mr. Bisbane didn't go shopping, of course, but Mrs. Bisbane left early in the morning after telling Mr. Bisbane that there were plenty of leftovers for him in the refrigerator. So there I was stuck with old Sourpuss, and all he did was sit in the wheelchair looking unhappy. I'd much rather have been laughing out with the principal Morales or chatting with, say, his family. I could have been tricking Miranda's dog playing cards with AJ's family or watching Aldo balance a broom on his finger. But no, I was watching a sad and grouchy old man act sad and grouchy. I could have just settled in for my nap, but I remembered what Mrs. Bisbane had said. This man had to get out of the cage. Out of your cage, I squeaked out loud without realizing it. Quietly, you little rat, Mr. Bisbane growled at me. Then he wheeled over to the front window and stared out. Okay, if he wasn't going to get out of this cage, then I'd get out of mine, because I had a new plan. Mr. Bisbane didn't notice me open the lock that doesn't lock. He didn't see me scamper out of the cage across the table onto the couch. He wasn't aware that I leaped down on the floor. He didn't even think about me until I stood in the middle of the living room and said, "Catch me if you can." I know he only heard me squeaking, but I sure got his attention. He was surprised as could be to see me there. How did you get out? And how am I never going to get back in? He rolled towards me. Come on, whatever your name is, let's go back into the cage. I let him just close enough to reach me. He bent forward, cupping his hands. But just as he reached out to grab me, I dashed over the opposite side of the room. You little rat, he said. You can't outsmart me. He rolled over the closet and took a ball cap off a hook. Again, he approached me, and I let him get almost within arm's reach. This time, he said the ball cap and said, "Okay, fella, let's play ball." We'll see about that, I squeaked as I bustled off to the living room. We quickly established the rule of the contest. 1, I would stay out in the open in places he could reach me in a wheelchair. 2, he could use his cap to recapture me if he could. Once he reached the dining room, I rushed into the den. Okay. Think you're clever? You'll see who's clever, he challenged. From the den, I scuttled over the hallway. By now, Mr. Bisbane's cheeks were pink, and he was almost smiling. You're smart, but you won't win this one. This time, I let him get the cap within a whisker of capturing me, just to keep the game interesting. Then I scurried back into the living room, but before he followed me, Mr. Bisbane slammed the bathroom, bedroom, and guest room doors. Aha! He was limiting my range of possibilities. Pretty cunning. In the living room, he decided to make a bold move. I hid under the couch. Then I let Mr. Bisbane stew for 5 minutes. Come here, Humphrey. You'll have to come out sooner or later, he called, and I thought he didn't know my name. He shook the curtains and pushed the chairs to see if he could rouse me. Too bad he didn't think of using sunflower seeds like Mr. Morales did. Yum. He finally got kind of bored, so I made a dash for the dining room. Mr. Bisbane followed, and this time I let him scoop me up in his cap. I win, he shouted triumphantly. He was beaming with pride, and he stared down at me, but you were a worthy opponent. He put me back in my cage, and I scrambled into my sleeping house. I have to admit, the game had made me a little drowsy. I don't think it was very long before Mrs. Bisbane returned, carrying several shopping bags full of packages. What happened, Bert? She asked when she saw her husband. Nothing, he said. But your face is all rosy. You look different. And you're wearing a baseball cap, she said. Sit down, Sue, he answered. I'll tell you all about it. He told her every detail of our match, chuckling and swinging his cap back and forth. I guess there are some things I still can do, he said. Now, how about a game of gin rummy? Mrs. Bisbane was almost speechless. Okay, she said, starting to get up. Mr. Bisbane waved her away with a cap. I'll get the card, you just sit. As he wheeled into the den, Mrs. Bisbane turned to me and quietly said, Thank you, Humphrey. Mr. Bisbane did frown the rest of the day and evening, except when Mrs. Bisbane beat him in cards. The next morning, which was Saturday, she couldn't even find her husband. Where could he be, she asked. He hasn't left the house in months. A minute later, he came into the house from the garage, his lap full of boards and bricks and things. I got an idea for our friend Humphrey, he said. Mr. and Mrs. Bisbane spent most of the rest of the day building an obstacle course out of a coffee table in the den. They lined up boards along the side so I couldn't stray too far. And then they set up things for me to climb over and climb under, like bricks with holes to hide in and big cardboard tubes. And Mr. Bisbane constructed a series of ramps for me to climb. Oh, we had a wonderful day. Mr. Bisbane got out of the stopwatch to time me on my runs and they made bets on how long it could take for me to get from the start to finish. Mrs. Bisbane even added a few treats to the maze, bits of apples and biscuits. I had fun. The Bisbanes did too, I could tell. On Sunday afternoon, the Bisbanes invited their neighbors over to watch me run the maze. Mr. and Mrs. Robinson brought their 5-year-old twins along. Glad to see you looking chipper, Mr. Robinson told Mr. Bisbane. I think he's finally feeling better, Mrs. Bisbane whispered to Mr. Robinson. Mr. Bisbane looked a little vinegary again on Monday morning, though. Why can't we keep him here, Sue? He asked. The children could never forgive me, she told him. He's really their hamster butt, she grinned. There's two weeks Christmas vacation coming up soon. I think Humphrey better spend it here. Could I believe my cute furry ears? She liked me so much she actually wanted me to come back. This was a whole new Mrs. Bisbane, one who liked me. By the time Mrs. Bisbane and I returned from room 26, I was pretty tired, but it was a good tired, and I knew I could rest up for my weekend during recess. Tip 14. Hamsters should be let out of their cages to run in a closed environment for an hour or two at a time. Thank you.